Okay, but we'll give everybody a few minutes before I actually start the class. But welcome everybody who's here so far. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for signing up. And I know I got this announcement out to everybody later than I typically do. So I really appreciate that you joined me. And honestly, I have found from people's comments after classes and things, or when I'm out at events and things, that a lot of times, whether it's my class or somebody else's, they like to audit the class first and just kind of get a flow of the ideas and what's presented and how to do something. And then they go back and watch in segments and stitch as they go along. And I think that is a very good way to do the recorded classes. And because you have the link forever, um, it makes it pretty easy. Um, I have a few people coming in here. Hang on a second. Okay, good. Um, the I had a problem with doing my Serger Savvy, which is YouTube Live. It happened in May and it happened again in June, and I'll tell you about that. The reason was that I had everything all set up in May, and I still actually have the pieces off to the side on the side table in my studio right here, ready to do the pin tuck technique. But what happened was because I use multiple cameras, I have my face camera that's built into the computer. I have a table one, and I have two on my machine for the screen and the presser foot. And because I do that, I need other software to be compatible with YouTube Live, which it always was. However, um, that software, which is called OBS, Open Broadcast System, this is probably more than you need to know. But what happened was they upgraded, and my laptop is 7 years old and it was no longer compatible. And I didn't find that out until I tried to go live and it kept crashing on me. So I didn't realize it at the time. I had my nephew come over who's very techy, very familiar with that software. And he got it going, and we did a test between the two of us, and it worked perfectly. Well, then when I went to use it a week later, it crashed again. And that's when we had to call Apple and do all this other stuff. So, anyway, I have a new computer on order. So, because I can't update this one anymore to be compatible with that software. But I promise you, I will be back with YouTube Live on the second Tuesday of the month for Surge or Savvy. But I've just got to get the new computer. It's on order. And it should be in very quickly, probably the beginning of the week. And we'll get that set up and be ready to go. And I'll put up an announcement. So, um, 12, I have 12:03. We'll give everybody one more minute. Also, I just wanted to mention, and I mentioned this in every single class, I am a Bernina ambassador, but I do not work for Bernina. But if anyone's thinking about purchasing a Bernina sewing machine, Serger, or Burnett, any, or even their software, any purchase that's over $1,000 is eligible for an ambassador appreciation coupon, which is a $100 thank you from Bernina of America. And this is only valid for people in the US because it is from Bernina of America. But if you have not made the purchase, I have to get notified prior to when you make the purchase or you've put money down on something. You can say, I'm thinking about doing it. Can you send me a coupon? And I will send that out. You can just email me, send me your mailing address, and I'll be happy to put that coupon in. All the instructions are on the back for where you mail it. And I think it takes about 6 weeks for Bernina to process it, but they will send you a check for $100. So that's kind of cool. And then you can spend it on fabric or whatever else you want to spend it on.
Yep.
So yeah, there's always something that you could use that $100 for, right? Okay, so it's 12:05. Let's get going with the class. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the Luxe Lounge pillow. And if you have downloaded or printed out the pattern, you know that the finished dimensions are 17 by 38. And I did put a note inside the pattern about the pillow inserts. And I will tell you, I have had I've gotten three different inserts and used a fourth one when I was at an event. And every single one was a little bit different in how firm or plump it was. So that was why I put that little note inside the beginning of the pattern, because the first one that I got was a really nice insert, and I had ordered it from Joann's, and I had ordered it a while before I ever got the pattern finished. And it was great. The pattern fit it perfectly, and that was the end of that. Well, then I made a second one and I ordered the pillow insert from someplace else, and it was considerably thinner, not as plump and not as firm. And I thought that the dimensions of the pillow itself, the cover that you're making looked a little bit loose on it. So I went around and took a deeper seam allowance around the perimeter. Then the third one that I got was even firmer than the first one. So they're kind of all over the map, and you don't really know what you're going to get unless you are able to purchase it in person and feel it. But all of mine have come through, gotten them shipped. So it's like a big surprise every time. But it's kind of like the three bears where you have too soft, too hard, just right. But two out of three of them, I would say, were excellent. The middle one, the second one that I got, I think was a little bit on the too soft and kind of skimpy side, I thought, for the pillow insert. So that would be something that you'll want to take into account when you get your insert. Create your pillow dimension according to the one on the pattern. But then when you get your pillow insert, if you feel that you want a snugger fit, just take the pillow insert out and you can just take in the side seams. It's like if you have something on that's too big and you just take in those side seams. We never have to let them out, right? So,
Exactly.
also, I always forget to mention this, but I wanted to say this, and I made some notes so that I wouldn't forget this. The reason I don't send the link out a day prior or a few days prior, and I wait an hour to a half an hour prior to the start of class, is so that that link doesn't get lost in the shuffle of everybody's emails, or it doesn't get accidentally deleted. And I find that by doing that, people can find it very quickly and easily. If within a half an hour before a class starts, if you do not see the link, check your spam folder. Um, I know I had one woman this morning who said she hadn't received it, and it was after I had sent it out. So it's probably in her spam folder, but that's no
It
big deal.
was.
Oh, you're the one. Oh, okay. All
Yep,
right, good.
it
All right.
was.
Okay, good. So I'm glad that I remembered to think of that. But that is my reasoning behind that, is that I know myself, it's too easy to lose links that are mailed out 3 days in advance. They can
Yeah.
either just get lost or, you delete them by accident. So I think if you send it out very quickly ahead of time, you're much better off. Okay, so that's all of the housekeeping. I wanted to show you a close up of some of the work that is on the pillow that is the cover girl of the pattern. Um, Hi, Suzanne. Suzanne, you're saying, where do we find something? Let me see. Hang on a second. Suzanne, can you unmute yourself and ask me the question?
Yes, the pattern. I've gone back through all of my emails and I must have missed it or something. I have my download, but where do we download the pattern?
It should have come when you registered for the class. You should have it. So when you go back, I can't do it right now, but
Yeah.
when you go back and look, if you don't happen to have it, Suzanne, excuse me, this is my allergies. If you don't have it, just email me after the class and let me know, and I'll shoot you the link for it.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sure, you're welcome. Anyone else
Did
with,
you hear me? What?
pardon me? Okay. And if everybody else would mute themselves in the meantime, that would be great. Okay, so I'm going to switch cameras. This is the cover girl of the one that I did. And you noticed on the center panel, I had a kind of a blender fabric in the background. And the fabrics for this pattern were from a collection called Boho Blooms. And I thought it was just beautiful and very vibrant. And I knew it would photograph well. And Sandy, you were asking about ideas and stuff. When I actually go to select fabric, and I'm thinking in terms of which one am I going to use for the cover shot of a pattern, I always think in terms of, is it going to photograph well? And I want it to be something I like, obviously, and that is to my taste. But I also think in terms of, will it pop when it's photographed? And this answered that. So I'm going to just switch over to the table camera and we're going to look at the center panel and what I did. And then we're going to talk about that. Okay. So here is a close up of that. And I used 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 different fabrics in this colorway of this collection that I used. And the 5th one was one that had these flowers in it. So what I did was I fussy cut around some of the motifs and I appliqued them on and I used just a very narrow zigzag and a 100 weight thread to do that. Now, it shows up quite a bit on camera, but in person, it actually doesn't. My cameras are very, very good, and they pick up very minute details. And then what I did was, and I will tell you what I would do differently, I went back and used a narrow cover stitch with 12 weight thread. And I just kind of went along and kind of basically sort of connected the dots or connected the flowers on that. Now, if I were doing this again, I would do the cover stitching first, then position the appliques. Let me just move this down too so you can see the whole shebang. It's the collection is just a beautiful, beautiful collection of fabrics. And I would applique these on afterwards because to stop and start accurately around each flower was kind of time consuming. And if I had done it previous to that and just appliqued over those lines, it would have been much faster and easier. But of course, we hate to do that fast and easy. Now, also, I want to draw your attention to the belt loop folder trim, and I'm going to show you an alternate way to do that if you don't have that attachment. But what I did was I attached that with 100 weight thread and a wide cover stitch, and it basically disappears on the fabric. But what it is really cool for doing it that way, if you have cover stitch capability, is that I can attach both sides in one step. And I'm going to show you how I did that on the one that I'm working on for today's class. But that's a really cool thing. On the belt loop folder, I used one, 2 different 12 weight threads, and I use my little thread fusion that lets me blend multiple threads through one looper. I used a wide cover stitch, and this is obviously the chain looper side with the decorative thread showing. And I thought that was really pretty against the dark blue of that. And plus, using the two different colors pulled in that orange
Mhm.
that's in these flowers, as well as some of that gold color too. So using thread fusion does a bunch of different things, and it lets you kind of get some cohesiveness as far as your colors go on your fabrics. So I wanted to show you that. And what I like to do, and let me go back. Does anyone have any questions before I click back to me? Everybody good on that? Okay. Um, I wanted to talk about working efficiently too. And what I like to do when I start the project is I cut out all of my panel pieces. First of all, I play with my fabrics. And this is something that I had changed my mind about when I was in the fabric store buying the fabric. I was originally going to put, and you'll see today's project in a few minutes, I was originally going to put the floral fabric as the B panels. And then I thought, oh, it's so pretty. I wanted to show it off a little bit more. So I changed up where I was going to do my embellishing on the B panels instead of the center panel. But I like to first cut out all of my pieces once I've decided on the placement of them. And I do play around with them. A lot of times I'll move things around and totally change my mind on what my original idea was, but I make sure I've got enough fabric for all of that. And so I cut those out. Then I like to cut out my strips of fabric that create the trim in between each panel. So on today's, you're going to see these are the little trim pieces that I did with a wide cover stitch and two different colors of 12-way thread in the chain looper. And let me show you that up close so you can see. I'm going to move the pillow cover that is on the pattern out of the way. Put that over here.
Hey, Gail,
Yes,
is that a belt loop?
yes. This
Okay.
is the medium belt loop folder. It is if you have a Bernina, it is the 15/30 belt loop folder. It finishes at about 5/8 of an inch. There are three different sizes. Baby Lock also has three different sizes that are very similar. They might be a little bit different by a tiny fraction of an inch, but essentially they're the same. But I know both Bernina and Baby Lock have three different sizes of the belt loop folder. And I will talk about if you don't have that capability or you don't even have cover stitch capability, I want to talk about different ways that you can embellish your pillow. So let me just show you these up close. Okay, so they look kind of pretty all like that, don't they? So what I do is I've cut out all of my big pieces. Then I decide what width I like for the trim, and I kind of like that medium width belt loop folder. So here it is. And I don't know if you can see as well on camera, but there are two different colors of 12-way thread. One is a very light aqua, and the other one is a little more turquoisey. And both of those colors are in the fabric that I'm using for the pillow or I'm going to be constructing today. So I have those, and let me come back to me. So I've made all of those and then I cut them in 13-inch pieces. You'll see that instruction in your pattern. And then I have the two long ones that go across the top and bottom pieces. And those are all done and pressed. And then I put them aside. And then so those are done. And then if my machine is set up with the belt loop folder, a lot of times what I'll do for the weaving strips is I will use the same width of belt loop folder for that, but that's not a hard and fast rule. You can go wider, narrower, or mix them up. Um, And I will just run those off. And I've got a bunch of those in back of me. And we'll get to that in a little while. But these are the belt loop folders for that. And I do not use decorative thread in the chain looper. I just use serger cone thread in that. And the wide cover stitch for that. Here's another one. So you'll see those. But if you wanted to embellish your weaving strips with decorative thread, by all means, go ahead and do it. I just don't. And I like the way it comes out. It's perfectly fine. But I'll run off yards and yards of that. You should see how much I have in back of me. And I started the weaving already so that you wouldn't have to sit and watch me do weaving for an hour. But so that is that. But when it comes to the pattern, you can use as many or few fabric combinations as you want. But just remember that you have to adjust that yardage if you're going to use fewer numbers of fabrics for that. So that is something to mention. And as I said, I made notes of things I didn't want to forget to tell you. Um, the thread fusion is great for color cohesion. The belt loop folder comes in 3 different sizes, and that's for, I don't know if Juki or Viking or Brother makes belt loop folders for their machines. They made for their machines that have, well, it would have to have cover stitch capability, but you can always go on your manufacturer's website, like Juki.com or Janome.com, and you can look for sergers, the model that you have, and then a lot of times in a drop down menu, it will say compatible accessories or available accessories, something like that. And you can see if they have them. And if you can't find it there, you can always call your sewing machine dealer and ask. Um, but I do,
Gail,
yes.
uh, Foth only has one belt loop, and it's a tiny one.
Okay, is it like a 3/8 one?
I would say probably yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and 3/8 is nice. 3/8 would work fine for this technique. It'll just be a little bit narrower, but it would look beautiful. It'll be fine. So, and all three, while we're talking about that, and you're going to see me demonstrate it, all 3 sizes work exactly the same. You just need to be careful about making sure you measure your strips accurately. If you measure them too wide or too narrow, they won't feed through the belt loop folder. But I would say of almost all of the attachments for cover stitch mode, the belt loop folder is so easy to use. It is amazing. Once you get it all positioned and get your stitching position all squared away on scrap strips, and then you put in your actual project fabric, you can run it through. I ran through yards and yards and yards yesterday in preparation for the class. And I did it in no time because once everything was positioned correctly, you could just let it go screaming through, and it was great. So, also, I'm just trying to think if there's, oh, I wanted to show if you do not have a machine that has that, I want to show you an alternate way to make these strips. And if you didn't even want to use the belt loop folder or what I'm going to show you next, which is the Clover bias tape maker, I'm going to show you that in just a minute. If you wanted to buy, purchase trim or create your own trim on your sewing machine, that's perfectly fine. I'm sure it would be beautiful and you can coordinate it with your fabrics. You don't necessarily have to do that. You could even use ribbon and something like that. So there are a lot of different possibilities for that embellishment. So let me go over, I'm going to show you just how I have this. Clover makes these bias tape makers, and I'm sure all of you have seen these over the years. And they make a ton of different sizes. And I think I've got about 5 or 6 different sizes. But this one works out to be about the same width. This is the number 18. So I think it means it's 18 millimeters across. But when I measure this, it does come out to be about 5/8 of an inch. And if you're doing short strips, I have found that I could cut my fabric on the straight of grain, but I really would suggest using it on the bias grain line because it will go through more smoothly and easily. And so basically what I do is I feed the fabric in. Let me just show you. I'm going to feed the fabric in with the right side face up. And I think that on the packaging, it will tell you what size to cut your fabric strips. This is about 1.5 inches. I'm just easing it, pulling it through. And then I have my fabric straight out and I have the little handle and I would have my iron here. And as I pull this along, I would be pressing it with my iron. And it comes out very nicely. It really does. It really is great. And then to attach it, again, if you don't have that cover stitch capability on your machine, you could certainly use a narrow zigzag. You could even use a decorative stitch on your sewing machine. So I wanted to get in a lot of different ideas for people to do. And give you a little bit more flexibility and creativity too. You don't have to make yours look exactly the way I do. And it never fails to amaze me how creative sewers are. Whenever I see people who've made my pattern and I go to an event and they say, "Oh, I made your Luxe lounge pillow and here's what I did." People come up with the coolest ideas and things that I never would think of. So if you make one and you want to shoot me a picture of it, I would love to see it because I think it's great to share these ideas with everybody. And it just builds that creativity within our sewing community, which I think is just so great. And people are great for sharing ideas too. So, but again, if you don't have a belt loop folder and you want to make that trim, you can either purchase it. You could use ribbon if you wanted. Ribbon might be a little bit lightweight, but it could work. You can use one of the clover bias tape makers. And so there are a lot of different ways that you can work around if you don't have the belt loop folder or cover stitch capability. So I'm going to put that off to the side.
Gail, regarding the two items that you just showed, the
Yep.
bias tape measure maker and the actual attachment for your cover stitch, do you have a preference? I'd have to purchase one or the other. I don't have either of those things, but which is easier to work with and use?
Well, to tell you the truth, if you're going to be making weaving strips, which you need a fair amount of yardage for, I find it actually faster to use a belt loop folder. But again, that's up to you and how available it is for your machine. But if it is available, I think the belt loop folder is well worth purchasing simply because I use it for trims. I use it for weaving. I use it for handles for tote bags and purses. The one thing I have never used my belt loop folder for is belt loops. I don't wear belts. If I had a 22-inch waist, maybe I would, but those days have gone by.
Thank you.
So, okay, so I have got my machine set up. And now when I do my belt loop folder, I use a wide cover stitch, but I'm going to show you first. I'm going to do everything that I wanted to show you in cover stitch mode first. Now, let me grab the newest pillow cover that I'm making. Hang on. Okay, here it is. And I thought this was so summery and pretty. I just love the fabric. And so what I did, I was originally going to use this floral fabric on the B panels, which are these narrower ones that I'm pointing to. But then I decided I liked them so much, I wanted to show it off more and use it as a center panel. So I did these little semicircles and curves on the B panels, and they are tight curves, but I wanted to show you how I was able to do that because it does take a little bit of practice. And I'm going to put it under my camera to show you up close. It does take a little bit of practice, but I'm going to give you a couple of tips on how to really get a nice result with that. Okay, so you can see these are pretty small semicircles. And while I have my ruler handy, I can tell you, like this one that you're looking at on top, from edge to edge is just about 3¼ inches. I even have a couple on this side. I think that might be a little bit smaller. This one, yeah, this one is about 2¾ but that's kind of a tight turn. And again, I use two 12-weight threads with thread fusion in my chain looper. But I had a couple of other tips for being able to do that. So let's go back to me for just a second, and we're going to talk about that. Okay, so here's Helene. Good. Hi, Helene. Welcome. Anyway, so in order to do those tighter curves or semicircles, what I did was I used my curved foot, and I'm going to show you a comparison of that with the standard clear foot, because I think this is a great thing to be aware of. And it's a great tool to have in your knowledge. Okay, so here are my 2 feet, and I think I want to lighten up this exposure just a smidge. Let me see if I can brighten it up. Okay, I think that's a little bit better. Okay, so when you look, C27 is the standard clear foot. I can use that in overlock as well as cover chain stitch mode. C23 is about a good 1/2 inch shorter, and that is the clear curve foot. And I know Baby Lock makes a curve foot as well. I'm not sure whether if they have two, whether one is metal and one is clear, the clear plastic. But for this technique, if you can get the clear one, go for it, because it slides over the fabric a little bit more easily than the metal. The metal is fantastic for gripping power, but in this case, I want to reduce that gripping power a little bit so that I get a nice smooth curve. But the difference and thing that I wanted to show you with this is because it's short, it doesn't fully cover your front feed dogs. So always be aware of that, because if you're doing something, not necessarily a technique like this that's being done on a stable woven cotton fabric, a quilting weight cotton, but if you were doing something with curves on a knit and you needed your differential feed set to a very specific setting, your front feed dogs are not fully covered with the curved foot. Go back to the longer standard foot. Okay. So, and both of these can be used in overlock and cover stitch mode. I've used them in both ways. So the curved foot is great for getting around gentle curves when you're overlocking, but it's also fantastic for doing embellishing with curves in cover chain stitch mode. So let me go back to me, and we are going to set up the machine. I have got my machine set up for stitch number 24, which is a narrow cover stitch. I think most machines now have 3 needle positions in cover stitch mode. I have the center and right needles in, but if I wanted to have the center and left needles in, it would be the exact same stitch because they're close together. You'll see me move it out to the left and right needles for a wide cover stitch shortly. But let me go. We're going to do the embellishing first. So let me get set up. I'll show you my screen. Well, that's my foot. Hang on. Okay, so I am set up for stitch 24, which is a 3-thread cover stitch narrow. So I have my center and right needles in and my chain looper. Now, one thing that's really interesting, I think, is that even with thicker threads or multiple heavier weight threads in the chain looper, I typically do not have to change from the default tension settings. I just leave it as is. But I'm going to show you using two 12-weight threads in the chain looper. So I'm going to bring my stitch length up just a little bit. I'm going to bring that up to 3.7 because those two 12-weight threads are pretty thick. I'm going to pop on my curved foot. Oops, wrong one. And still the wrong one. Sorry about that. Third time's the charm. Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to put, excuse me, my C23 curved foot on. That's the Bernina Burp. Get my threads under here. Now, I have not threaded up my chain looper yet, so I'm using Thread Fusion. And I've got two 12-weight threads in. These are the same ones that I did the stitching on that panel for. So let me get my air threading. Okay, I was locking the threading tubes on that. Let me see if I can move this over a little bit. And you'll see, and let me lighten it up. No, let me put my light on the inside of this. That's a little better, but not great. Hang on. Okay, so here is my chain looper right here. And I've got my two 12-weight threads. I need my thread cradle to bring those two threads through. So I'm going to put my cut ends into the air port for the chain looper. Okay, hang on. Oh, I know. Okay, here we go. I'm putting my cut ends into the threading port. And you can see it come out. And I've got the loop end. And now I'm going to pull my two 12-weight threads through. And you need to pull enough length for it to travel. The chain looper port is as far right on the machine as the chain looper is left under the machine. You can see it's farther away than the lower looper or the upper looper. So you really need a little extra length when you're threading your chain looper, even if it's just with serger cone thread. I'm just pulling it through. Watch it come out. Here it comes. There it is. So there are my two threads. Now, my number, and you're going to leave about a 4-inch tail hanging down there. Now, you never want to start on your actual belt loop folder strips when this tail has not been brought up to the top. Why? Because I guarantee you will get a thread nest and a jam underneath. Bring that up on starter fabric or scrap fabric. All right, so, and I have the two different cover hem tables, and I leave my attachment holder on my extra one, and it makes it fast and easy to switch out if I'm going to do any specialty techniques. Okay, so let me bring this out a little bit more. I wanted you to be able to see the inside of the machine. And let me bring down that exposure a little bit. It's a little bit blown out. Okay. So now I can actually pivot this out to make it easy to load in my fabric. But first, I want to bring that chain looper thread up to the top. So I'm just going to grab some starter fabric that I have here. And you can see, oh, this is another thing. I always like to warm up when I do something like this because they're a little bit challenging. So this is what I did yesterday with scrap fabric. I was just testing my curves to see if I could get a nice smooth one. And what I did, I interfaced the back, and I just used the Pellon SF101. It's a woven fusible stabilizer. It's inexpensive and it does the job. And it's enough stability for doing any kind of embellishing with cover stitching or even decorative stitching on your sewing machine. It just gives enough heft and body to the fabric that it's not going to get all puckery. Obviously, I didn't press this because it's scrap fabric. So let me bring that those two chain looper threads in the that are underneath up to the top. Okay. Before I load in the fabric, I just want to bring that. So let me get this underneath. I'm going to put the fabric down. You're always in cover chain stitch mode. You know that you're going to start with your fabric under the needles, not just under the foot. So let me, and I'm going to hold the fabric and help it along to get started. And not only is this going to bring up that thread, but it also gives me a chance to look at, does the stitch look okay? Does it look the way I want it to look? And yes, it does. Here it is right here. So let me raise the presser foot. I don't have my knee lift in right now because I don't have room for me, the cameras, and everything else with the knee lift in. So clip that, pull it through. And this is my locking fork so that if you're starting and stopping in the middle of the fabric, you're not going to lose your stitching. So here is my sample stitching right on top. You can see, and it looks perfect. And that's the two different beige and cream colored. One is a variegated. So now I brought the chain looper threads up to the top. Now what am I going to do? I am going to do a couple of different things. I have my clear curve foot on, but in order to enhance the performance of that foot, I'm going to lower or lighten the presser foot pressure. And you can do that, I believe, on almost every single brand and model machine. Just check in your manual for where the adjustment is. Mine is a lever that's on top of the machine up here. 4 is my default setting on that. I'm going to bring it all the way down to 1 to make that presser foot pressure as light as I possibly can. Some machines have, excuse me, a little knob also right on top over the needle area. I know that Baby Lock on their Triumph and Ovation, you can see my hand in back of the camera. It's on that left side of the needle side of the machine. It's a dial that you can turn and lighten, and it has a raised ridge on it that goes from wide to skinny. And the narrower that ridge is, the lighter the pressure is on the foot. And then as you turn it to the wider end of that raised ridge, it's going to clamp down harder on your fabric. So if you don't have a Baby Lock or a Bernina, you might have something that looks like a knob or a dial right up on top over the needle area. And what I would do if you've never touched it before is I would take a Sharpie marker and mark where the normal setting is for it, so that what if you lighten it or tighten it for any reason, you can get it back to where it belongs in the default setting. So, because a lot of companies, for some reason, don't label those levers or dials, and I like having that to know that I've lightened it up or that I'm back to my default setting. So I've got my clear curve foot on. The clear one is plastic, so it slides a little more easily. It still does let me control the fabric, but it doesn't grip the way a metal one does. And I've lightened my presser foot pressure. I think I'm going to bring my stitch length down 1 tick from 3.7 to 3.6. Okay. So let's go back to the machine. Okay, here we go. All right. So I'm going to just move the belt loop folder out of the way because I'm not using that right this second. But I have drawn on the back with a friction pen. I've drawn my little curves. Now, when I want to start right on the edge, I'd like to start with that scrap fabric first, just so that I don't get a thread jam on the edge of the fabric. I can go right on very smoothly. And again, I'm just going to put this under. And in order for my decorative threads to show on the right side of my fabric, I am stitching with the interfacing or wrong side face up. So it doesn't matter where I am on this because I just want it to get the stitch going. So I'm going to get this right here. Okay, and now I'm going to get my line kind of angled. And if I don't stay exactly on the line, it doesn't make any difference because this is on the wrong side and it's a friction pen. It's going to be erased. But as long as I have a nice smooth curve at approximately the size that I want, that is all that counts. You don't have to be absolutely perfect. Heaven knows I'm not. So now it's going to go right on. And I'm going to raise my presser foot, use my locking fork. I'm pulling my needle threads forward, clip those, pulling my fabric out at 10 o'clock, like where the 10 is on your clock. And now my stitches are locked, and I'm going to just clip it off of, let me just show you what I'm doing. I'm going to clip off that starter fabric. Okay, so here is the curve I just did. I started the stitching right down here, right here. So let me just clip right between them. And I don't have to worry about the starting edge of my curve coming unstitched because, as you know, the starter or the starting stitches from beginning to end are locked in place. So there's my curve, and I could go around and do other ones too, but by having a clear curve foot on and lightening the presser foot pressure and adjusting the stitch length so that it doesn't take too big a jump between stitches, that gives me that nice smooth curve. And again, this is a pretty small one. Let's go under the close-up camera. Get my thread tails out of the way. Put this over here and switch over, and I can even measure that for you. Okay, so here's the one that I just did, and that's pretty small. That's from edge to edge, it's about 2.5 inches. So that's a fairly small curve, but you can see it's nice and smooth. It's pretty close to the line, but it's not exact. And does it matter? No. So if you don't follow exactly, don't be ripping out your stitches. It's not worth it because it's going to look perfectly fine. Okay. So any questions about that at all? Anyone have any questions? You can unmute and just ask.
What's the radius of the circle, Gail?
Well,
It's Vanita. Thank you.
oh, how are you? Good to hear
Good.
from you. That one was about 2.5 inches. The other ones that I have on my actual project fabric, let me bring that back again. I have a few different sizes, but they're all relatively small, to tell you the truth. Let me go back here. And I have my ruler still right here. Okay, so I have got, I'm measuring this one. And this one is about 2 3/4. The one above it is about 2 3/8. So they're all pretty small. They're just small curves. And what I'm going to do, and I haven't done it yet, is I am going to either add some little buttons with beads or just some beads onto that panel, and I'll post pictures when I'm done with that. I like to get my stitching done before adding beads just so they don't get in the way of the presser foot if I decide to do something close to where I want to do the beads. I want the beads on after I do that stitching. So,
Gail,
yes.
can you put your ruler on the edge all the way to the top of the circle? Instead
Yeah.
of going the lengthwise, go the other way, the width.
Oh, okay. Well, it's only a semicircle, Vanita.
Yep, I know. That's why I just want the radius, which is
Oh,
half
okay.
of a circle.
Okay, let me go back to that camera. Okay, so like from here, are you talking about?
Yes, yes.
Okay, hang on. Now the edge of the fabric is underneath here. So let's actually, the edge of the fabric, the seam is right here. So it is 2 inches across, or just about.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions about that at all? That's a good one.
Gail, I actually have a question about the 12 weight threads in the chain looper.
Sure.
Were you tying 2 pieces of thread to an existing thread to get that to go through? How come you had a different color?
Oh, because and I do have a serger tip clip in my YouTube channel, and it's called How to Use a Thread Cradle. And what I do, I have my thread right here. It's just a random piece of serger cone thread, and it's long. And what I have is I fold it in half, and I have my little loop right here. And the loop, I put the cut ends through, okay? And you'll see this better in the tip clip because I have the camera trained exactly where I want it to go, and the lighting for it is perfect. You're going to fold it in half. It's quite long. Here it is. From here to here. And you're going to put your two cut ends in the threading port for the looper that you want, and mine was the chain looper. So I'm feeding that through, and then the loop end, you're going to hold on to that so that the whole thing doesn't go flying through the machine. Then the loop acts like a little lasso, and I'm going to put my decorative threads through that loop, and then I'm pulling them through. The reason being is that one 12-weight thread will easily go through air threading, but two 12-weights together is thick and bulky.
Okay.
And I don't think they're going to go through by themselves in the air threading tubes, because those tubes are pretty small. So it just needs a little help. So this is like a little leader that pulls it through for me. And even I can even use two 8-weight threads in the chain looper, but I use the bypass bracket on the front of my machine. What machine do you have, Virginia?
I have an old Elna dedicated cover hem.
Okay. All right. Is it air threading or no?
No.
Okay.
Oh yeah. No,
No.
really.
Okay. Um,
My Serger's an air threader, but not my Elna.
okay. So you could test it. I always say to people, when you're using multiple decorative threads, depending on your machine and the power of the motor, never overwork your machine. You can test it with two 12-weight threads. I think the Elna will handle that. I really do. My very first serger was an Elna 945. It was a combination overlock and cover stitch machine. I think I got it in 1999. But their motor was pretty good on it. I think at that time I was such a novice, I didn't even know about any of the decorative threads, but I know it had a pretty good motor. You could test it. If your machine feels like it can handle the two 12-weight threads without huffing and puffing and feeling like it's really being overworked, go ahead and use it. But you would want to thread those together. When you're threading multiple threads, you treat them like one. They're going through your machine simultaneously.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Sure does. Thanks.
Okay. All right, good. All right. But check out my tip clip on using a thread cradle. You might have to scroll down a little bit in it. I forget when I did it, but it was over a year ago. But it's there, and it will show you exactly what I'm doing. But I am using it with the air threading machine. So, but it's the same principle whether you have air threading or not. Okie doke. Okay, so now that I've got my belt loop folder on the machine, what I'm going to do is I am going to switch from a narrow cover stitch where both of the needles were together. Let's go back here. Yay, I hit it the first time. Good. Okay, so you can see I've got my center and right needle in. So now with the belt loop folder, I am going to, oh, Vanita, thank you. She put up the YouTube link in the chat. So thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you.
It's always good to have great people in the class, which all of you are. So that's fantastic. Okay, so I am going to move my center needle, which is the one on the left right now. I'm going to move it into the leftmost position because I want a wider cover stitch. When I am doing this, I'm going to open up my door. And I'm going to have to move that needle thread from the center threading position to the right needle thread root so that the tension is correct. And I'm going to change my stitch on the screen as well. And many of you know, but just as a little refresher for everybody, the only thing that governs the width of the stitch in cover stitch mode is needle position. There are multiple things that will change the width of the stitch left to right in overlock mode. But the only thing that changes the width of the stitch in cover chain stitch mode is if where the needles are. Now, I just moved the center needle that was much closer to the right needle to the left needle position. So the space between them is wider. It's going to give me a wider stitch. If I had a third needle in that center position, that stitch width would still be exactly the same. But I'm not going to bother doing that right now because I want to do more of the stitching itself with you as we go on. And I'm going to show you one other thing with that. So, but for creating the belt loop folder, the reason I want the width a little bit wider is it gives me a better fudge factor for making sure that I catch both edges of the fabric as it folds under. And I'm going to show you how that belt loop folder works. So let me come back to the machine. Let me just get my needle threaded here. You don't have to see that. That's the same thing. Whoops. Coming down and into my right needle position. Get fresh end on my thread. That usually helps. There we go. Okay. So my needles are all threaded and ready to go. I'm going to take off my curved foot because I'm going to use the belt loop folder. I want better coverage on those front feed dogs for control of my fabric. I'm going to put on my clear standard foot. I'm going to take this, put on my clear standard, which is the longer one that I showed you on the table. And I'm also going to return the presser foot pressure to the default setting. Okay, so that's not. So I'm going to put my presser foot pressure back to 4. And I've got that on. Now, let me come back so that you can see how I am loading this into the belt loop folder. It's dark. Okay, so let me lighten this up a bit down here. Okay, let me bring this forward a little bit. Here's my belt loop folder, and let me try to bring this out a little bit more. Okay, so I have my strip cut now for that 1530 belt loop folder that finishes at about 5/8 of an inch wide. I have cut my strip of fabric exactly 1.25 inches wide. So I have that in. So what I'm going to do is put that into the belt loop folder, right side face up. And because I can pivot the foot or the attachment out of the way, it makes it easy to grab the fabric. So I'm keeping it right between these little, what I call guardrails. They fold up a little bit on the side or bend up, and keeping that in. I'm going to pull my belt loop folder strip all the way under because, again, I'm in cover chain stitch mode and I want to start in the fabric. Now, I'm pretty sure that my fabric or my belt loop attachment should be in the correct position for this because I was working on it last night. So what you can see already, let me just pull it out a little bit. You can see the ends fold under and kind of meet in the middle on the underside. So the reason I like that wide cover stitch, as I said, it's really just more of a fudge factor for me. I can see that the edges are both going to be caught as I stitch. And actually, I think I need to move this. I want them as centered as possible. And you would want to do this on a practice strip first. Get your needle centered. And the rule of thumb is if your stitching is too far left on your strip of fabric, you're going to stop, loosen this screw that you can see my finger on, and move the folder a little bit left. If your stitching's too far to the right, you'll loosen it and move it ever so slightly to the right. And they're very, very fine movements. You're not going to move them like a quarter inch or anything else. It's very subtle. So let me close up shop. I have got my stitch length still on 3.6, and I want to change my stitch from the narrow cover stitch to the wide. So let me show you how I'm doing that. That's on my screen. And if everybody could mute themselves, that would be great. So right now I'm on stitch 24. I'm going to just do my stitch selection, and I'm pretty sure that the wide cover stitch is 22. But yes, 3 thread wide. So now you see the tension settings for my left chain needle and my right chain needle, nothing in the center, and for my chain looper. My stitch length is down to 3.5. I think I'm going to pop that up to let's go up to 3.7 for that. And that's variable. That depends on the look that you want as well as the thickness of your threads. I'm just looking at my needles. I'm going to move my belt loop folder. The needles look a little far left. Here's a good example of what I'm doing. And let me get the camera on so you can actually see it. Okay, so I am going to loosen this screw that my nail is on. And I'm holding this and I'm going to move it a tiny, and I mean like maybe a 1/16 of an inch left, because those needles look like they're a little bit too far left. Now, one thing I want to mention with the belt loop folder or any of the attachments is when you have to stop and make a change, you're not going to immediately on the next stitch see that position change, because the distance between the needles and the mouth of the folder or whatever attachment you have on is about 1 3/8 inches. You have to give that the needles a chance to catch up for that gap of space, and then you'll start to see the difference in your needle, in your positioning. So let's see if I guessed right on this. If I do, it's a miracle. I always have to make a few fine-tune adjustments usually. Let me just pull those longer threads through so they're not caught. Okay. And once I get going, like last night when I was making all of these strips for the weaving, I went screaming along. I'm not going to do it that fast now because it'll make the camera jiggle. Okay, I won't go to the very, very end. Raise my presser foot, my locking fork. I'm pulling my needle threads forward. This will lock those final stitches. You know, if you pull too hard on those last stitches, if they aren't locked, it'll unravel the last 4 or 5 stitches. Watch my needle threads disappear. Let me lower that exposure so it's not so, oh, you know what? Let me shut my light off here. That's what the problem is. Okay, that's better. Okay, watch these needle threads pull through, and that's because the chain looper thread is still attached. So watch them disappear to the opposite side. Do you see that? That means my stitches are now locked. And let's look at this under the close-up camera. Okay, so let me get this out of the way. Here it is with those two 12-weight threads. And that would be the side if I was going to use this as the trim between them, or for weaving, and I wanted the decorative threads. This is the chain looper side. That would be face up. But even though the raw folded edges are under there, there's enough density to the stitching that it's camouflaged and you're never going to see it. Then I would just give it a quick press with my iron and be all set to go. But you can see how fast I was able to do about a 44-inch length of fabric. I actually think it's faster than using the Clover bias tape maker. There's the side that you saw being stitched, my needle threads. Those are the chain looper. Those are the two 12-weight threads that you see on that side. Okay. Any questions about that at all? Super easy to use. This one, as I said, is the middle size. It's 5/8. If I wanted to go with the 3/8 size, which one of the ladies said she has for the FOF, that would work beautifully as well. It would just be a little bit narrower trim, but still look beautiful. So, and it works exactly the same way. I think on my narrowest one, which is the 10/20, I think I cut the width of fabric, if I recall correctly, I think it's about 7/8 of an inch wide. This one I cut 1.25 inches, and for the widest one that finishes off at about 7/8 of an inch, I think I cut that one about 1 5/8 inches. But you'll test it with your fabric and your particular brand of attachment as well. But the belt loop folder, don't be intimidated by it. It's super, super easy to use. Okay, so that is that. Now, so we have covered things in for decorative stitching, for embellishing with those little semicircles, using the clear curve foot, lowering the presser foot pressure, just maneuvering the fabric. And oh, the other thing I wanted to say about that is you can't obviously go at top speed as you're going around to create a really nice semicircle or a full circle either. But you do want to have the fabric going or the stitching going at a certain rate of speed. And it's almost like when you're in your car, if you're trying to turn, like getting into a parking space, if your car is at a dead stop and you've got your foot on the brake and it's not going anywhere, to turn those front tires is harder because the machine is not moving. But when you move forward, even at a slow to medium pace, it's very easy to turn the wheel and turn the tires to make your turn into a parking space. Same thing with this. You want some slow to moderate speed as you're stitching because it makes it easy to maneuver and turn the fabric under the presser foot. But that clear curve foot, if you have it, and lowering the presser foot pressure, both of those things will give you a much better result as well. Any questions about that? Okay, so we've got our trim, and as I said,
Gail,
yes,
excuse me.
that's right.
I had posted a question there. I saw your original video on the belt loop binder, and I was looking at the cut measurements. So like on this 1530 binder, I think in the video you said 1 1/8. So I'm wondering, does it depend on if you're doing the narrow cover stitch versus the wide cover stitch, or should we just change that measurement to 1 1/4 all the time?
Change it to 1 1/4. It will work at 1 1/8, but I found that when I brought that width up, and this is when I talk about subtle differences. I mean, 1/8 of an inch is not a ton, but I found that when I cut it 1 1/4, especially for like a quilting weight cotton, I found that the edges met better. Now, you asked about the narrow cover stitch too. You use the narrow cover stitch with the belt loop folder? Yes. But because the needles are closer together than the wider cover stitch, that fudge factor has been reduced. You have to have your fabric absolutely dead center as it's going under the needles so that those narrow, close together needles catch both edges of the fold underneath. And that's why I like to go to either the wide. You could also use the triple cover stitch too. It just builds in makes it a little bit easier so that if you weren't 100% down to the tiniest fraction of an inch in the middle of both folds, you're going to still catch them with that. But you've reduced that chance with the narrow cover stitch. But can you use it? Absolutely. You just have to be extremely precise with that one and make sure that you've got both edges of your fabric caught.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay. Anybody else with a question about that at all?
Gail,
Yep.
would you suggest using a fabric stiffener like Best Press on those strips before you ran them through the belt binder?
I have not had to. Most of the time when I've used the belt loop binder or folder, I have used a quilting weight cotton and I've just given it a press beforehand, but I have not starched it or used Best Press or Material Magic or any of those things. But if you find you get a better result doing that, then by all means, you definitely can. The thing that matters most is, did I get a good result and does it look the way I want it to look, and is it looking good? Is it good quality? But I have not had to. I've just cut my quilting weight cottons, put them in after I press them, and I have not had a problem at all. But if I did, I probably would try something like a Best Press or a light spray starch or something like that. And that would be, sometimes some fabrics can be a little bit different, like even some of the lower quality quote unquote quilting weight cottons that are very, very thin. Those might benefit very much from a spray starch. But most decent quality quilting weight cottons will go through pretty easily without that.
Super. You just saved an extra step.
Okay. And saved you a little Best Press or spray starch too.
Exactly.
Okay,
Love it.
great. Any other questions about anything else before we move on? Okay, now I'm going to show you this really cool trick that I tried out and I just love it for attaching the belt loop folder strips to in between the panels. And I'm going to go back to the table camera because I want you to see this. I'm going to move these out of the way. Okay, so this one is already attached, as is this side. Can you see the stitching that attached them? What I did was I used a wide cover stitch, but in my needles, I used 100 weight thread. Now, Wonderful makes one that's called Invisifil, and they make it in multiple colors. I use just like a silvery gray one because I don't have it in a million colors. And I found that it stitched perfectly, and I really think it's very discreet. Even looking close up at this with the camera, it's very hard to see that stitching. So that works beautifully. You could probably also use a bobbin weight thread, which is usually an 80 weight thread. It's a little bit heavier than the 100 weight, but it would do the trick. And what I did, and I'm going to show you how, I'm going to put the trim on this one at the machine. I'm going to switch out my serger cone thread in my needles, and I'm going to take out the decorative threads in the chain looper. And I'm going to put the 100 weight thread in my needles and just my serger cone thread in the chain looper, because that's going to be caught underneath as I stitch it on. I don't need to waste my more expensive thread. So let me go back to me for a second. And this is just, you talk about a time saver. Now, again, there are multiple ways you can do this. If you don't have cover stitch capability, you could use a narrow zigzag with that lightweight thread and zigzag on those strips between the panels on the pillow cover, and it would look perfectly fine. But if you do have it, this is just a cool way to do it, and plus it's fast because you're getting both edges stitched at once. So I'm going to go back to my machine. I am going to cut my serger cone threads out of my needles, pull that thread out, and I am going to cut my decorative threads that are in the chain looper as well, and pull those out and throw them away. Pull that out and throw it away. I'm taking those off. And I can't get the camera around the back of the machine to show you the thread fusion, but here it is. And that was on my chain looper spool pin or cone pin, whatever you want to call it, just there. And then I had these cones on that. And if you're not familiar with thread fusion, what that does is it allows the multiple threads to go through one looper and be positioned so that the tension stays consistent between the two of them because they're close together under that thread position on the back of the machine. Okay, so and I don't like my classes to be a big commercial, but that is available on my website. Okay, so I'm going to just take off one of these serger cones because I just need one in, I just need one in the chain looper. So I'm switching that over. And I just love this. Now, let me just show you. This is another thing that is a really handy thing. And when Pam Massey, who is the head of the overlock division for Bernina, told me about this tip, I was like, really? Do I really need an extra cover hem table? And she said, well, try it out and see what you think. Well, guess what? Hello, it is like the greatest thing since sliced bread. So hang on, let me just switch my camera. Okay, so I'm going to back out a little bit so that you can see. All right, so I have this cover hem table and I keep my attachment holder screwed onto that. I'm going to pivot this out of the way, open this up, and I'm going to take this table off that has everything on it. And I have a second one that is just the cover hem table itself that I'm going to pop on so that I can do this technique. I don't need the belt loop folder on for this. So I'm going to put my serger cone thread into my chain looper. That was my threading tubes locking in place. Okay, so I've got serger comb thread in my chain looper. And now let me just show you the 100-weight thread close up because it's very, very thin. Let me get this out of the way for a second. Here it is. It's very fine. And I've just got 2 of these combs. So very thin, very lightweight. You could probably, and I say this hesitantly, but you could probably try monofilament thread, but I find that monofilament thread can be very persnickety and temperamental. Sometimes, depending on the brand that you use, and especially in a serger. That's why I'd go for something thinner. Or the other alternative would be use serger comb thread or all-purpose thread that blends with the color of the trim that you're stitching. So I'm going to put these in my left and right needle. They're the exact same thing. I think this small one was a sample size or something, and this one I just bought. This is the regular size. So that's going to go in my left and right needle.
Gail,
Yes.
does monofilament thread get brittle after a time?
Um,
Do you know?
I I have not had that experience, but honestly, I'm probably not the one to ask because I hardly ever use it. You know what I use it mostly for? To hang up my little snowflakes when it's around Christmas time when I'm decorating.
Understand.
There's truth in my videos. I do tell the truth. But honestly,
Exactly.
I don't use it a lot. But does anybody else have experience? Has anyone else had it where it's become brittle? Vanita, how about you? Anyone know?
And the thread you're using, is that poly or
Yeah,
what is it? What's
it's
the
a
company?
polyester.
Okay.
It's a 100 weight polyester thread. And
Okay.
honestly, I was a little bit nervous about would it stand up to the tension of a serger. And I'll give you my one other tip that I'm just threading my needles right now, and I need my light on so I can actually see what I'm doing. Hang on a second. This thread is so thin. It's hard to see against the white of the machine. Hang on a second.
I don't like using invisible thread in my serger. I use, and it is, and I keep it in a plastic bag, in a baggie, just like I do my other types of, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, I don't know about it being good for several years, but I tried it in my serger and I wasn't pleased. So
Okay.
I rather use the 100 weight thread.
And some brands are better than another. And honestly, I don't have enough experience of having used a lot of different brands, but some of them I have found make a huge mess even in my sewing machine. But it's been so long since I use them, and I would hate to badmouth a certain brand, but there are some that do work better than others. Um, I do find that Wonderfil's threads do work well for decorative stitching and stuff. And again, I don't get any commission from them at all. I wish I did because that would be nice, but that's okay. That's all right. I don't feel compelled to always just recommend their threads, but I do find in general their threads are very high quality. There's very little breakage on them, even with this. Now, I'm going to shut my light off again. What I'm going to do, I did find that when I use the wide cover stitch with this lightweight thread, my right needle every once in a while would tend to break because the tension on that one is higher. And I'll show you the settings on the machine. I want to go to the screen. There we go. Okay. So my left needle is 3.8 for the tension. My right chain needle is 5.3. I dropped that down to 5. Oops. Let me bring it up with this. I have a plus and minus button on the front of my machine. When I lowered that tension to 5 on the right needle, that seemed to eliminate the breakage. And I hope it doesn't prove me wrong when I'm talking to you now. Now, again, I've rethreaded my chain looper. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go to my scrap fabric to bring up that chain looper thread, just so that I'm not starting with it under the machine and I don't want to get any kind of a jam on my actual project because it's a pain. All right, so I'm just putting that down. I'm going to just get that camera for you. Okay, this is just my test scrap fabric to bring up the chain looper thread. Okay. Needle threads pulling forward and see no breakage on that. Now, the other thing I would say is because it is such a lightweight thread, let's not put it to an acid test with screaming along at a fast rate. I would use a very moderate speed as I stitch because let's not test it beyond what it really can do. Let me get my camera squared away a little bit better here. Okay. All right, because I want you to see exactly where I am. So I'm going to attach, this is like 2 tips in one. Let me go under this camera first. After this step 2, we'll take a quick break so that if you want to use a restroom or grab something to eat, you can. Okay, so as I said, these, excuse me, have already been attached with the 100-weight thread. Now, on this, I stitched my seam allowance on this panel toward the light blue fabric. And I used a 4-thread overlock with the stitch width on 6, but because it's so white, it's very hard to see that. But we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So the seam allowance is over here. It is not bulky, but when I go to attach my strip of belt loop folder trim, it creates enough of kind of a bump that I can just with my finger keep the edge of the belt loop strip right against that seam. You could straddle it if you wanted to, but I just find this is quick and easy. I don't have to put any Wonder Tape or the double-sided sticky tape on it to keep it in position because I can just keep it against that edge of the seam. And because it is against the edge of the seam, it kind of camouflages the fact that there is a seam right there. So that's what I'm going to do as I go down. And that's exactly what I did over here as well. And you can't tell that the seam is right here. So whatever side your stitching is stitched to, I can lower this a little bit too. And let's see if we can get some better contrast. Okay, now you can see the stitching. 6 millimeters wide is an exact 1/4 inch seam allowance. It's pressed toward the blue side. This side is flat. It kind of creates almost like a little backstop to hold that fabric in place. So now I'm going to go to the serger and stitch that in place with the 100-weight thread, and you'll see exactly how I get this positioned. Okay. So let me make sure I've changed around my exposure here a few times. So let me make sure it's, yep, it is going to be bright enough. So now I'm getting this under that clear foot. And this is where having a clear foot is an absolute must because I need to see where those needles are in relation to the decorative threads here. And they're basically almost straddling it, starting in my fabric on the edge. I've got my stitch length still on 3.7 because I'm going through a double layer of the belt loop folder as well as the layer of the yellow fabric as well. So let's stitch. And what I'm doing with my right hand is I'm keeping this edge of the belt loop folder right up against that seam, okay? And I'm going to stitch just at a moderate speed. This is one of my favorite tips for this pattern. It really is. And you can do it for a million other things too. And even pulling it forward with the locking fork doesn't break those threads, which is nice. And I'm sure a lot of thread companies have 100-weight thread, but I do know that Wonderfill makes it in a wide variety of colors. I just have some generic ones. So, okay, here's the one that we just did. And let me raise that exposure again. Okay, here we are. You can't even see that stitching, can you? I think,
Gail,
yeah,
would you just show the back?
yep. Okay, so here we are on the
Thank
front.
you.
Yep, good point. Here we are on the back, and you can see there's that stitching. There's the chain looper thread. This is the seam that goes between the panels. This is the belt loop folder stitching onto that panel.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But you can see how cool that really fine thread is. And now I have to go down twice on each panel? No, it's on. It's great. So I love that tip. I think it makes it really fast and easy. But again, if you wanted to use the 100-weight thread without cover chain stitch capability, it would work very nicely with a narrow zigzag on your sewing machine as well and be very discreet. But you can check out Wonderfill's selection of colors. I heard one woman say that they have kind of it sounds weird, but kind of a lavender color 100-weight thread that she said it tends to disappear. Carol Higgins says it's virtually invisible! Exclamation point. It is. Um, but this one woman said that she uses like a lavender, and I think it's got kind of almost like it goes to the lavender taupe side for color. And she said that tends to disappear on a lot of colors of fabric. So you don't need to have 50 different colors to pick from for that. And as you can see, this color is not even close to that pumpkiny color of the strip itself, and it does disappear. So that's just a function of it being such a fine thread. But again, the only difference, and you would test it on your machine, you might not need to make any adjustment on your tension setting. But if you notice that one of the other needle threads breaks, then try lowering that tension and see. Not a lot. I went from 5.3 to 5.0, and that solved the problem. And I have not had any breakage on that right needle with that 5.0 setting. So, any other questions? I think we can take a quick break. I've got 1:38, so we've been at this for almost an hour and 40 minutes. But let's take like 10 to 15 minutes. You can grab something to eat, use the ladies' room, whatever. I'm just going to pause the recording, and then we'll come back and continue on with the rest of the class. But did anyone think of anything else before we break that they'd like to ask about? I don't hear anybody. Go ahead and unmute yourself if you want to ask. Are we good? Okay. So let's plan. Let's see, it's about 20 of the hour. Let's plan to definitely start in again at about 5 of. Okay. 15 minutes will give everybody, I think, enough time to do what they have to do. And we'll meet up again. And if you think of any questions, we'll address those as soon as we come back. Is that good for everybody? Not up and down. Okay. See you back in a few minutes. Okay, we'll give everybody a couple of more minutes because I did say till about 5 of. So if anyone has any questions, I'll just get ready.
Let's see, Gail.
Yes. Hi, Suzanne.
Hey, I just want to let you know I did go back and I finally found where that was, so I have my directions. So,
Oh, good. Oh, good, good, good. Okay, great. Okay.
me-
Thank you for letting me know. Yeah. Okay, that's perfect. Wonderful. So that works out very well.
are you planning to be in the Raleigh area anytime coming up?
Um, I was down there, I think it was last fall.
Mm.
I don't think I have anything on the calendar for that. Let me see, I'm going to be in Salt Lake City next. I have to be outside of Chicago in July. Um, I don't think I have anything booked. Were you talking about like Bernina World of Sewing, that
Yes.
store? Yeah. Yeah, I was down there I think it was last fall. I'd have to go back and look in my calendar. I don't have anything on my calendar yet, but that could change. Probably not for 2025 though, because I'm pretty well booked for the rest of the year with that. In fact, that was why I kind of snuck in this class for today because I had been in Virginia and then I was in Atlanta. That's where I was just a couple of weeks ago. And then I said, well, I think I can squeeze in one more class before I go out to Salt Lake City. So this was the weekend for that. But if I am going to be down there, because I've been there a couple of times already, and I think they just opened a new store, didn't they?
Oh, they have the Wilmington one, and yes, I think there's one down. Uh, where is it? Near Myrtle Beach. No, I should know the name of the
It's
place.
in South Carolina and it starts with an M. It's something like,
Murrell's Inlet.
yes,
That's
yes. I was going to say it says like Cove or Inlet or something like that. It wasn't an area that I was familiar with. But yes, that was really cool. So they've got 3 locations now.
yeah, I just heard about it. I think she just made the announcement to even her staff that
Oh, really? Oh, because I saw it
they
on
could talk
Instagram.
about it, that they could
My
talk.
goodness. Okay. Well, yeah, I just saw it on Instagram the other day. And
Oh,
so um that that was big news. So good for them. 3 stores is a lot. I know when I was at the Atlanta Sewing Center, they've got 3 different stores, and I was asking them how far apart they are. And between 2 of them, they're over 100 miles apart. So they cover quite a geographic area that's pretty spread out.
news, really. It's very good news
Yes,
for.
it is. It is good news, and it bodes well for the sewing world. So um, that's really good. Um, so I'm pleased about that. We'll give everybody, what did I said 5 of, right? So we'll give everybody about 4 more minutes to get back in. So um, and going back to sending out the link, if you don't see the link within a half an hour of the beginning time of the class, do check your spam folder because that's where it probably landed. So, um, I can't emphasize that enough because every once in a while I get people who are disappointed because they didn't look in there. So, hopefully,
Oh, I have you in my contacts, so
Okay. All right. But
yeah.
even still, sometimes you never know with email. Every once in a while, stuff gets stuck. I know I've had stuff from people that I've emailed back and forth with over time. And for some reason, correspondence that they send is,
Well,
or it lands in the spam folder. So it's,
mine came, I think the two things verifying came back to back, I think. And so I assumed they were the same thing. And so I didn't, I looked at one and I didn't look at the other one. And it was, user error is always.
that's perfectly understandable and acceptable. We don't have any problem. I know a lot of stuff about user error, believe me. I'm gonna pull this forward just to do the next part of our class. Put these off to the side. I think we're good with these for right now. Okay. I think we go on. Okay, a couple of more minutes. We'll give people. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is take a look at how to do the weaving. I'll give you a preview of coming attractions. Here we go.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's really pretty.
Gail, did you cover how to access this class after it's over going forward?
No, I didn't. But
So you'll
what
do it at the
happens?
end, maybe?
Yes. Okay, Virginia.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. What happens is after we finish the class, in about another hour and a half or so, I have to wait for it to kind of, it does this thing like it renders or something like that. But then the link will be sent out to you sometime tomorrow. Okay. And also, I'm going to include, let me go back to me so you can see since I'm talking. I'll have all of the information there. I think we usually include the link for the pattern again as well. And you'll probably see some kind of a little message about please don't share it. This is how we earn a living and blah, blah, blah. But also, I don't know if any of you were aware that there's a vacuum that a manufacturer had contacted me about testing on sergers. And we worked back and forth for a number of months to find one that works. And it's available through Amazon. It's sold out right now. There is a big demand for it, but I believe it should be back in stock in about 3 weeks. But I can show you, and actually, the one, if you order it, it will have a white tube on it, not, or clear, I should say clear tube, not this black one. This was a prototype of one that we used, but I wanted one that was just a hair more flexible. But this has 3 different power levels. It's really nice. We've had all good reviews on it, and it comes in a little zipper case with a bunch of other little attachments, which again, I'll be honest, I have not touched any of those because all I was interested in was one that would work well for my serger. But I found that that worked very well. And because the tube, the nozzle was so narrow, it got into a lot of little spots that were hard to access with other vacuums. But I'll put that link in the email tomorrow when I send out the recorded link for this class. So that's good. Okay, I think we're just about, I think we are there actually for this. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was the weaving panel. Now, on mine, that's the D panel when you're looking at the schematic for that. You can see I've got the weaving panel here, and let me just put this under the camera so that you can see it a little more easily. Do you have to do weaving if you don't like to do that kind of thing? If you're not into any kind of kind of fussier handwork or anything else. No, you don't. You could pick a different fabric and put it in here. Or if you wanted to put in a fabric and say do some decorative stitching on your sewing machine or an embroidery motif, again, that would be another option. You don't absolutely have to weave the panel. I just think it's pretty. And also, what I can do is when I weave the different belt loop strips, I'm incorporating all of the fabrics that I used in this. The only one that I didn't use in the weaving was this panel, the darkest one. And that was because this was one that I had in my stash that worked perfectly with the other colors, but I only had enough to use for these side panels. I didn't have enough to create the weaving strip, so I skipped it, and I don't think it really made any difference at all. But I used one, two, three, I think three or four, I think three different fabrics in these. And so for today's, you're just seeing that right now under the camera. I am using one, two, three, four different fabrics. And the way I do that, I'm going to pull this forward a little bit because, and I, again, for efficiency in my workflow, when I've done the belt loop strips for the trim with the decorative thread, before I take the belt loop folder off the machine, I just switch it all out to serger cone thread. I take off my decorative threads and I run off yards and yards and yards of all of the colors that I'm going to do for the weaving. And this is what I was doing. And when I say I was able to do all of these strips, and there's a ton, there's way more than I need here, but I'm going to use it for something else too. I was able to do all of those strips from start to finish in about, I would say 40 minutes because it's faster than the bias tape maker and pressing, believe it or not. Okay, so let's go back to the close-up of that. Okay. I just thought this fabric was so summery and super pretty. I liked it. But let's go through the technique itself and how this works. Okay, I'm going to move this forward and get these out of the way. What I did or do, I have this little cut.
Gail,
Yes.
excuse me. Are those strips bias?
No, they are not. They're all on the straight of grain.
Okay.
But you
Thanks.
could cut them on the bias. Say if you had a plaid or a check that you wanted or a stripe, something like that, and you wanted to do them on the bias, you definitely could do it. But these are all, if they go through the belt loop folder on the straight of grain very well. That's a good question.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, so the first step, I have this June Taylor cut and press board, and if you look at it up close, this thing is ancient. It's got all kinds of stuff, and I think I've shown this before in classes. Years ago, the other side has a cutting mat on it, and it was probably late, and I had something on here, and I went to cut it, and I forgot to flip the board. So I have a nice little cut, but guess what? I don't really care. It's still very functional and fine. So what you're going to do first, this is that SF101 Pellon interfacing that's fusible. I cut a piece that's considerably longer than the panel itself, longer and wider. I'll give you the dimensions for panel D, the finished or the cut size of that panel is cutting two of them 4.5 inches wide by 12 3/4 inches long. So I want to make my weaving wider and longer than that because I want to catch all the ends of these edges in the strip beforehand. So what I do is I cut, and I have a bigger ruler here. I cut a piece of interfacing that is almost 14 inches long. And I think it's about, yeah, 6 inches wide. So it's a little over an inch wider and longer than I need for the cut one. And the reason being for that is that that way I make sure that I've got enough length and width when I do my weaving, and that I don't find any of the edges peeking out from the seam at all. But if push came to shove and excuse me, and I did run a little bit shy on the width or length of that, I could always take a deeper seam allowance. But by making the beginning edges wider and longer, it eliminates any bother over that whole thing, and it doesn't create a problem or change the dimensions of the pillow at all. So what I do, let's go back. So I've got my fusible interfacing with the fusible side face up, and I pin the four corners in place. I didn't pin these two corners in place, but I'm going to flip this around. Hang on a second, just so that we can see it a little bit better. Or maybe I'll just move the camera in a little bit closer. Okay, so you can see I've got a lot of pins in just holding these edges. So what I did on this is, because you can see through the interfacing, which is handy, I'm just weaving. I put my strips going one way. I did them right on the diagonal, and I just followed the grid underneath. I just put the edge right along the corners of those, pinned them in place one by one. And I did play around with the placement of the colors so that I would be happy with that. And so what I do is I just maintain the same order for those. I'm going to put this pin right in here just so it doesn't get in the way. So what I did was I started with that pumpkin-y orangey color down here, right at the very corner, right here. Then I did this. I started with this. And again, you're only seeing the needle side of that cover stitch. If you wanted to stitch and have the opposite side with decorative thread in there, you could certainly do it. I think for me, I'm pretty happy with the way it looks like this, because you've got a lot visually going on, that I just did it with serger cone thread. So I started with the pumpkin color, then the next one I put in, I'm going to pull this down just so you can get the idea of how I got started on this. Oh, where did I put my pins is the next question. They're right in back of me. Okay. So what I did.
Gail,
Yes.
is that fusible side up?
Fusible side up. Yep. The rough side is up. This is the unfused side that's against the cut and press board. Okay. Yep. Fusible side up. And that's important. So what I do is, again, I'm just going to do them on the diagonal. I'm just going to give you a rough idea of how this works. And I'm going to pin that first one in place. Make sure my hands are in the camera range here. I think that's better so you can see. Okay. So what I do is I'm going to pin that in place, and I would give that a haircut. Then I decide which one I'm going to put next to it and just butt the edge right up against it. And I would let it overhang the edge of the interfacing a little bit more even. So let me just move this out so that it is exactly the way I do it. I just move that out so the edge is past the edge of the interfacing. move this one out a little bit. And again, just butt it right up against there. And the grid, you don't need a cut and press board, but it's really handy simply because it gives you lines that you can follow. And it does make it easier to do it. The next one I did was this piece, just like this, easing it along. It's pretty easy. I'm not a weaver per se at all. And so I thought I would be able to do some kind of a variation on the weaving pattern for you today, but I did not come up with anything that I loved. So rather than get a yucky look to it by experimenting and then kind of being stuck with it once all the work is done, I decided I would just go with something that I knew was tried and true and work like that. Then the next one that I did was this plain aqua color. And what I do is once I have these in, I'm using these really long strips. You can see them. They're quite long. They're probably the width of the fabric. I would trim them as I go, just like this. And then I would continue to repeat those colors. And I use the exact same pattern, the exact same order of the fabric colors. Wait a minute, did I miss one? This, oh yes, one more yellow. Okay, and then I did this yellow one. And I used the needle side of the belt loops folder. Let me pull that up a little more so that it looks correct. Just like this. Pull this one up past that edge. And I'm just keeping all the edges. I don't need to pin both edges right this second. And then I would just cut these strips, which I can do. I'm just going to cut them a little bit longer to be on the safe side. Because I will use these for the second weaving panel. Okay. And then I would continue those along. Now at this point, I could pin this second edge in place, but sometimes it's easier when you're just doing like an over and under pattern when you're starting, just to kind of flip these out of the way. And I would start and bring this right up to the edge this way. And again, keeping it on that 45-degree angle. I would bring, I should say, I would do all of these strips the full 14-inch length. Okay. But, you know, we could all grow old watching me do this weaving like that. So I won't keep you that long for watching it. But I would finish all of these strips in this same direction all the way the length of that interfacing. Then I would start in weaving on the opposite direction. So I would start with my orange and I would get that pinned in place, bring that down. And again, this is just an over and under. So then I could flip the opposite ones up. And the next fabric that I had is this one. Let me see. So this is going under, and this is going under. And if I notice I make a mistake in the weaving pattern, I just pull it out and fix it right then and there. And I'm just going to snug it up against this one. Super easy to do. It does take a little bit of time, but it's not brain surgery, believe me. So just get that in. Then the next color that I do is this one. So again, just like that, over and under, just like this. Get that under, snug it up. And I periodically do check because sometimes, even though I think I've got everything nice and straight and even, they aren't. They can just kind of bow and curve a little bit. So I do try to straighten them out. But even if you had the slightest bit of curving in your weaving pattern, it's not the end of the world, believe me. So on this one, so that's the way I get it started and I get going. I'm going to go toward the one that I'm already working on that I've made a lot of progress on and finish that up to show you and then talk about what I like to do before I actually put it into the other panels of the fabric. So the next one that I'm going to do, I'm going to flip this around. Any questions about that at all? It's just really pretty. You can use that weaving pattern on a lot of different types of projects too. It's just pretty, it's nice, but I will say it does take some time. So,
Gail, this is
yes.
Lydia.
Hi, Lydia.
Hi. Why would you, could you just do it one great big long piece instead of the two pieces and just cut it? Or
That's
does it?
yes, that's a very good question. Yes,
Okay.
you absolutely could do it. The question was, could I cut a double-sized piece and do both panels at once? Yes, you can. The only reason that I don't do it, and again, I'll be perfectly honest, is because by nature, I'm not a weaver. And I just find that having it be a little bit narrower makes it more manageable for me. And if I had it double the length, I wouldn't be able to fit it on my cut and press board.
Okay.
It's just not long enough. My board, the cut and press board is 18, about it's actually probably about 20 inches long if you go outside of the grid, but I wouldn't be able to double the length. I'd be able to double the width, definitely. And I did do that, but I just found that because I'm not a weaver,
Me
that
neither.
yeah, I just found it
Okay.
easier for me to manage. Does it take more time? Probably a little more, but that's just the way it goes for me.
Thank you. That's what I was curious about.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Okay, so let's go back to anybody else with any questions while I'm still here? Anything? Okay, good. Okay, so let's come back down here. Okay, so, all right, so this is the last color I used. So the next one that I'm going to do, oh, and I have a little weaving needle that looks, I had it right on top of this before. Where did it go is the question. I'm going to get these out of the way. I'm actually going to move these out too. Oh, here it is. It was hidden. Okay. No big deal. I got it. Okay. This is what I was using also. And I don't know whether this is like a darning needle. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's got a blunt end on it. It's a rounded blunt end, and it's got this very long eye that I can get my belt loop strip into, just like that. So it's plenty wide, and that makes it pretty easy to weave through as well. So on this one, I am just going to start under, over, under, and many times the strip will twist as it's coming under. So you want to straighten that out. Let me get a pin in this one. I'm quite sure anyone who really is a true weaver, if they're in the class, is probably sitting and gasping at what I'm doing. But this is the way I know how to do it. And hey, it works for me. So I'm going over, under, over, pulling the strip through, straightening it out, continuing along. So going back to the question about doing both of them, if you have a bigger cut and press board that will accommodate double the length or double the width, and you want to do it and you think it's more efficient for you, by all means, go ahead and do that because there's nothing wrong with that at all. So I think the next color I'm going to do is the pumpkin one. And this is one of those things you could probably even do this if you're sitting watching TV or anything else because it is attached to the board. I have to pay attention to what I'm doing because I wouldn't say this would be my finest hour in creativity. So I usually do it in my studio. And I'll just do a couple more. Pull that in. And again, I like to make sure the strips are relatively straight. If you want to put a pin to hold it, you certainly can. I just did that down here. Okay, so pumpkin, and then the next one is this color. But yes, these are all on the straight of grain. Whoops, I'm under my interfacing. That's not going to work. Pull it through. It's almost like hypnosis sitting here watching this. I hope nobody's falling asleep. Ooh, you know what? I'm hung up. This is the first time this has ever happened. I couldn't move my needle. It's caught on the stitching under this strip and it just pulled it. I've never had that happen before. Don't let that happen to you. Okay. Now I think we can continue. It's always good. I'm a big person for if a boo-boo happens in a class, I call it a learning opportunity. It's always good to figure out how to fix something. And it kind of pulled that, but I could press that and that'll just smooth right out again. Okay, so that one's done. And I would just continue along with this right to the very end. And as I said, my cutting width is 4.5 by 12 3/4. So what I like to do, I'll take my clear ruler, and let me bring out my camera a little further so we can see this whole thing. I'm going to move this over here, bring this in. I think I need to be a little further out. Okay. So what I do is I'll get that weaving all squared away. And then when I think I'm pretty close to what I need for my finished dimensions, and I think I need one more strip down here, then what I'm going to do is take this over to my iron and press it from this side and obviously pull out the pins before I flip it. But I'm going to give it a good press. But because the fusible interfacing is under the belt loop strips, which are double layer themselves, it will just basically give you a tack fuse because it's a lot of thickness for that steam to go through, but it will tack it down enough that when you go to flip the fabric, you're going to ever so gently flip it over, and then you can put a press cloth on it or try it without it and really nail that interfacing to the back side of the belt loop folder strips as they've been woven. And then you're going to gently take it over to your sewing machine. And what I like to do is I've got my edges all squared away. I'm going to go and take just a straight stitch on my sewing machine and secure the edges in place, and then cut it down to that 4.5 by 12 3/4 inches for the dimension. And then I'll do the second D panel as well. So I think when I measured this, I think I needed one more strip in here, and I think this was the light colored strip. So let me just do that and remeasure again and make sure I've got enough that I'll meet the width that I need. And again, if you didn't have belt loop strips, what else could you use? You could weave your trim if you wanted to, as long as it's not super, super thick and bulky. If it's got a lot of dimension to it, maybe you might want to think about something else. But you also do not have to do the weaving if this is the kind of thing that drives you crazy. I know there are sewers who say they absolutely can't stand doing any handwork. I really like to. I just find it, believe it or not, very relaxing to do. And I enjoy it. I like that kind of fussy work. So let's see if this is going to give me the dimensions. This is by 13. I think I need one more little shorty strip right on this corner, right down here. But the rest of it looks very good. So one more little strip. And that was this color. And as you cut your long strips, save those super little short ones for things like these little corner pieces, because all I need is a few inches right here. Don't toss them out after you're done with with a longer length, because it'll come in handy. And then when I have strips left over, I'll show you a baggie of what I've got. I save them because you never know what you're going to do for a future project where you may need them. Okay, so this will do it. And let me just remeasure again. 13. Yeah, as long as I've got 13, and I've got over 6 inches of width. So I'm good to go on this. So again, I would just take this over to the iron, give it a quick press from the top. Actually, not a quick one, but get it as tacked down as I could. Then flip it over to the wrong side, press it again. Let me let Barb in. Okay. Hi, Barb. I hope you weren't waiting too long. I was busy doing my weaving. I wasn't paying attention to the screen. I hope you weren't waiting there very long, but welcome or welcome back. Okay, so this is set. Also, some other ideas, if you didn't want to do the weaving and you wanted to just add a regular panel of fabric in, you could think in terms of doing built-in decorative stitches on your sewing machine. You could do it embroidery motifs. Oh, and that was something I didn't mention earlier in the class. On your center panel, if you didn't want to do cover stitching or some overlock techniques like flat locking or pin tucks with a rolled hem or anything else, what would be really, really pretty, I think, would be a monogram or somebody's name. You could put that on the center panel and do, some embroidery or decorative stitching around it. So just to give you some ideas of different ways that you can change up the pattern. But I think that would be really pretty. And in fact, I could see that using tone-on-tone whites or beiges of fabric that were very kind of quiet, and doing an embroidery if you were doing a white fabric, maybe you might use a beige for the embroidery, or a bolder color if that's what you like and it's going to go in a room that would work with. But just to give you some different ideas of ways to change up the look of the pattern too, that are not necessarily serger. And again, you can create, if you had a friend who wanted to make this pillow who does not own a serger, could you do it on your sewing machine? Absolutely. You could definitely do it on your sewing machine. So don't think that you're limited to just using your serger on that. Okay, so questions about weaving, anybody? If you were using the wider belt loop folder, you would need fewer strips simply because each one is a little bit wider. It's about a quarter, there's about, yeah, a quarter-inch difference between this one and the widest one. And vice versa, if you wanted to go to the narrower belt loop folder, you would need more strips because they're thinner. So, I think that pretty much makes sense and is pretty self-explanatory. No questions about the weaving at all? Anyone want to mention anything at all about that? I like to use a woven, also that woven fusible interfacing, and that way, instead of using one that's a knit, that might distort just a little bit with that. This one works well, and it's nice and strong, and gives good body to the fabric as well when you stitch it into those panels. Okay, so
Gail, very quickly, you mentioned the Pellon number for the fusible. Would you mind saying it again?
Yeah, it's S as in Susan, F as in Frank, 101. And I used to always buy it right at Joann's. I'd buy it by the bolt because I'd use it in kits and stuff like that. But I'm quite sure you could probably get it at your independent sewing machine dealers, or if you're not close enough to do that to your dealer, you could probably purchase it online as well. But I used to buy it right at Joann's. So, but of course that's gone. And I've been reading this week that I saw that a lot of their inventory was purchased by Michael's craft stores. I was in the Michael's near me probably last week, and or a couple of weeks ago actually, and I did not see any fabric in there because I hadn't heard or read anything that definitely said that they were getting the Joann's inventory. But I just did a quick tour around the store to see if I saw any. I did not see it. I haven't been in there since, so I'm going to be curious to see if they do carry any of their materials and, like interfacings and stuff like that. But SF 101 by Pellon is what I used.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, Pam says you think Michael's is supposed to have it. Yeah. But I don't know if that's going to go into all of the Michael's stores or if they are being selective about where they send those fabrics. If anyone knows, feel free to chime in, because I don't have any insider information on that at all. So, also the other thing I just want to mention is before I press these weaving strips to the interfacing, I pull out all the pins just to make sure I don't hit any of them. And I just, if I have to straighten out any of the strips at all, if they're a little bit curved, that's when I do that before I hit it with the iron. So that's a tip too. I just want to make sure I'm not forgetting any of the stuff that I wanted to mention. Okay, so another thing that I wanted to talk about was how could you vary the pattern? As I said, and in your pattern, it gives you the finished dimensions, 17 by 38. Another pillow size that you see quite frequently for sofas or accent pillows is a 20-inch square one. Now, when I am working with panels, I always think that using an odd number is more visually pleasing, but that's up to you. But what could you do with that? Well, let's see, that A panel is the center panel. And I think that is 8 inches when it's stitched. Yes, because it's 8.5 by 12 3/4. So what could you do to change this up? But say you wanted a companion piece. If you were using, all right, let's do a for instance. Say you wanted to make the bench pillow for a piece of outdoor furniture on your patio. Maybe you have a longer swing or an outdoor sofa, and maybe you want some matching or coordinating accent pillows, and maybe they're 20 inches square. I think they also make them like 18 inches square. What I might do with something like that is the original center panel is cut 8.5 inches by 12 3/4, and it finishes up at 8 inches across and 12 1/4 inches tall. What I would do for that, for say a 20-inch square pillow, is I would cut that center panel 10.5 inches wide by 10.5, just a 10.5 inch square. And then I might cut 2 narrower panels for the side, and those I would cut, say, 5.5 inches by 10.5 inches. And I think rather than cut it in half and have side by side, unless you had bold colors that you were kind of playing against each other, or you wanted to go corner to corner diagonally, that would be kind of cool with 2 different colors. But you can change up the dimensions of these panels to fit smaller pillows and totally different dimensional size pillows, squares, rectangles. If you wanted to do it for a circular pillow, you certainly could do that as well, but you would have to go and figure out your circumference on that, depending. And there are a lot of different round pillows, or I don't think I see oval pillows too often, but if you think in terms like square pillows as companion pieces and coordinating pieces to this, I think that would work really nicely. And if you wanted to incorporate a lot of different colors, you could just skinny down the widths of those and just build it out in the same way that we did with the longer bench pillow dimensions. Was that as clear as mud? Does anyone have any questions about that? Anything? Okay. All right. So that's that. Also, okay. So then the back pieces, I just did like an envelope back that one side overlaps the other, simply because if you've got this in a place where it might need to be laundered, if something spills on it, I'm sure nobody has anybody who ever spills anything on anything, or even if it's outside, sometimes just from being outside, they just pick up soil from, whatever, rain or whatever. I don't think I would leave it out. If you had sunbrella fabric, you could probably put it someplace pretty sunny. I don't know how the sunbrella fabric, though, would go through a belt loop folder. I've never tried it. Has anyone worked with that fabric at all to do anything special? Bye, Judy Harvey. Have a good weekend. Take care. Sunbrella would work really well, and that's kind of got that UV coating that helps protect it from fading. If I were using indoor fabrics like the quilting weight cottons for outdoor fabrics, I would want to use it with either an awning over it or an umbrella or something like that, or just have it in an area that's shady by nature. My yard tends to be kind of shady, but our deck has a little more sun on it. I would keep it under a retractable awning that wouldn't fade the sun or fade with the sun. It probably still would. Pam says she thinks sunbrella. Pam, can you unmute yourself? Because it sounds like you've worked with it. Maybe you can tell people about working with it. I know it's obviously stiffer, and it is. Oh, you don't have the microphone today. Okay, but you said it is a little bit stiffer. I think it would still work for the basic pillow itself, but it is stiffer, certainly because of that coating. Most indoor and outdoor upholstery fabric is heavier because even for indoor use, they usually have a stain resistant coating on them. I suppose if you washed it, it might soften it up a little bit, but it would also reduce the resistance to staining. But I don't see why you still couldn't use the sunbrella for the basic pillow itself. But I don't know that it would go through the belt loop folders as well. But you could certainly try it, and you may be successful if you trim down the width of that stiff fabric a little bit because it's a little more resistant to turning under. But by maybe making it a little narrower, I think that might help. But I haven't used it. If I do, I'll definitely post some information about it or talk about it in an upcoming Serger Savvy. Okay, so I just want to go to the back of the pillow. Oh, and also, once you've got all of your vertical panels done, then it's time. I'm going to move this back out of the way. This over here, and I've got a couple of panels on the floor hanging, or a couple of little strips on the floor that I don't want to lose. Okay. Let me just grab this one, the cover girl again. Okay. And change the camera. Okay. So once all of these vertical panels are done and you have attached and stitched in all of your trim pieces, then you're ready to add the band across the top and the bottom. Those are pieces F, and those are cut 3 inches. And I gave myself that 3 inches because I thought, again, for the plumpness of the pillow, I'd rather have a little bit of looseness that I can take in rather than have it be too tight. But depending on the pillow insert that you have, that will give you the answer to that. So I stitched that on. That's 3 inches by 38.5, which is the full width of it before you've done the perimeter seams. Then I go back and stitch on that trim, and I use the exact same technique of butting the edge of the belt loop folder strip against that seam and cover it over. Also on the pattern, you see that I tell you to cut each of the vertical strips 13 inches long, even though the panel itself is 12 3/4. You're just going to snip off that excess top and bottom. I just do that just again to make sure that you don't run short at the top or the bottom for that, but just snip it off and cover it over. But then you're going to attach the F piece to the top and the bottom, and then you're going to stitch on your trim across the whole width of the pillow, and then give the whole thing a press. And then you are ready to go onto the back pieces. And again, the back pieces are very simple. Now, again, for variations, if you wanted a snap closure or you wanted to create buttonholes to close it up, you certainly can. I think it's just as easy just to do the overlap and underlap on that. And that lap is very generous because I don't want, it bulging open and exposing that pillow on the inside. I'll tell you what the added or what the overlap width is. Where's my little ruler? I can feel the underlap. The lap width, when I've hemmed the edges, and I'll talk about that, it's about 4 3/4 inches from edge to edge that's hidden underneath. And in the instructions, I tell you to put the shorter one down first, the G. And the reason being is that once that's hemmed, and you have your choice of how you hem that. Let me bring my camera down. This is a lot of print. It's like looking in through a jungle. Let me flip this over. I used my wide cover stitch. I turned under the fabric twice so that I don't have a raw edge showing. And I used my wide cover stitch to hem that. I did the same thing on the inside panel. But when I was putting this together, and if you're looking at your pattern, that would be on page 8. If you put the shorter piece, which is G, down first, and then put H on top of that, when you turn this right side out, that opening will fall right in the center of the back of the pillow, like that. But again, for stitching that, all you're basically doing is hemming. You're not doing anything fancy at all. So you can either do it on your sewing machine. If you wanted to finish the edge and overlock with a 3-thread wide, just so that you fold under once, and then stitch it on your sewing machine, you can do that too. I just like to fold it under because I don't like any raw edge peeking out on that. And especially when I bring this places, because people always look at how something is constructed. One other thing, and I thought of this morning right before we went live. If you had a pillow insert that was one of those ones that is not super plump or firm, and you had it before you finished your whole panel, what you could do, Patricia, I can't see your whole question. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I get that in. Hang on a second. Could you create the back using a zipper? Yes. Yes, you could. You could. Patricia asked, could you do a zipper? Yep, absolutely you could. You could use snaps, zippers, buttons, whatever you want to do. The back is just pretty plain, but if you wanted to zhuzh it up yourself and do some piecing on the back, you definitely could. So, no big deal on that. But just going back to the point I wanted to make about if you have a pillow that is not super plump, like the second one that I got, another way that you could plump up the inside is you could take some kind of light to medium weight batting, and if it's fusible, great. You could fuse it to the wrong side of the whole front piece, and that would also add a little bit of body as well as thickness to your pillow top. So that's another thought for you to keep in mind if you have a pillow that's a little bit on the flatter side. And the interesting thing is with ordering these pillow inserts, and if you have an upholstery store near you or a decorating store, they may have some in stock that you could really check out for yourself in person before you buy it. But the interesting thing is they all come with the exact same 17 by 38 measurement, but there is a considerable difference across different brands. And I don't have the brand names of the ones that I ordered online. I think I ordered them through Amazon, though. I mean, there's nothing that Amazon doesn't have, right? But the very first one I had, I know I ordered through Joann's, but that was over a year ago. I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I have covered everything. What else? Nothing else, I don't think. Has anyone started a pillow yet? Not yet. I know the invitation for this class did go out late, and I did want to make it clear to people that they certainly had will have the recording so that they can make it, and they didn't have to be prepared today, which I certainly wouldn't have been if I wasn't the wrong one running it. But anything that I didn't cover, I'm just trying to think.
I have
Yeah, go ahead.
No,
You go ahead.
Don't forget, I won't forget.
No, you go ahead.
I wanted to know the kind of serger thread you like, not you talked about the Aurifil for the loopers, but do you buy Aurifil for everything?
Actually, those are Wonderfill threads, the decorative
Wonderfil, excuse me.
You can use Aurifil is a very good serger thread. I've used Maxi-Lock and I've used Mettler Ceracore. All three of those are very good.
Thank you.
Yep. The thing I would say about those is sometimes you'll see these bargain bins of serger cone thread and they look very linty on the cone. Don't buy them because they're just going to clog up your machine and clog up your threading tubes if you've got air threading. And also they tend to be, if they're super linty, they also tend to be very flimsy and they'll break easily. So, but going back to the machine, I typically use an ELX 705 needle for constructing on something like this. And because I'm going through multiple layers, most of the time I use a 9014, especially if you're attaching the belt loop strips to the back. It's not that they're super, super thick and heavy or anything, but I find the 9014 works. And that's what I've used for the decorative stitching too on the belt loop strips when I've had the 12-weight threads in my chain looper. So I'm actually glad you asked that. I knew there was one thing I was forgetting. Hang on. I'm going to switch back to the one that I am currently working on. And let me switch the camera so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay. Now, you see on this yellow one, it has this little medallion design on it. Well, I cut this precisely so that the medallion was in the center of that 5.5-inch width of the fabric. But when I put the belt loop strip trim over it, it looks off center. And even when I add that outer border fabric, which I have it here. Hang on a second. And I'll tell you my little boo-boo on this. I'll be very honest about this. Okay, so this fabric is going to go here and it's a 1/4-inch seam. And if you're overlocking or using a chain stitch on it, you can get that perfect 1/4-inch seam using a 4-thread overlock by adjusting your stitch width to 6.0. And it really and truly is exactly a 1/4 inch. But going back to what I wanted to talk about with this medallion and how it looks off center, it is exactly cut on center on the piece of fabric prior to attaching it to this panel. But, and I looked at it after I stitched it and I was like, I can't believe it still looks like it's off center. But what I'm going to do to make sure that it doesn't look off center is when I attach the second piece of trim, and this isn't really the right one. Let me grab one that is. When I go to add the second piece of trim, I'm going to make sure that I add that so that the width of it is sitting on this yellow fabric to get that back into the center. Now, I was cutting the fabric for this. I had worked on it during the day, but I hadn't cut this one yet. And when I cut it the first time, was I paying attention to where that medallion was? Oh no, that would have been too easy. I just cut it and that medallion was way off to the side. Um, and I looked at it and I said, ugh, and I only bought a fat quarter of the fabric, but I had enough to cut it correctly to show in the class today. But when I added that trim, once again, visually, it looks like it is off center. So when I go to add this in, I'm going to make sure it's sitting on top of the yellow fabric, and that will bring that medallion back and look correctly centered. So, and I made that mistake on one of my other pillows also, as far as not measuring. You would think that I would learn my lesson the first time, but I didn't. And but there are workarounds for that if you're short of fabric. I think I'm going to run back to the store tomorrow and just buy one more fat quarter so that I can cut the other side and have it look perfect for this, because I'll use it as an example in the classes. But that is something to think about. Also, if you're using directional fabrics, make sure if you're using multiple directional fabrics where there's a definite up and down, make sure you cut it in the correct direction, and make sure when you stitch it, they're all going in the right direction too. I was at an event, I forget where we were doing the table topper pattern, which is that one in back of me. You can see the black one, and then the green one is over here with the gold. And the fabric that was selected was directional. And a couple of the panels, the center pan, not the center, but the middle panels were directional. And one of the attendees had it stitched one way on one side and the opposite way on the other side. So if you're using directionals, make sure you've got them all going in the same direction for that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to add. As I said, I'll post pictures. I want to do some beading, and I may even do, and this is part of the reason that I wanted to put this floral panel in the center. I may do some beading around some of these floral motifs, but I'm definitely going to use either buttons and beads or just plain beads around some of these stitched semicircular motifs, which I think will be kind of pretty and fun. And I love doing beading. So I don't mind spending the time doing that. And because I think it looks really pretty and it really pops. But even if I just use buttons, I've got a bunch of buttons that I have sitting on my cutting table that I was picking out that kind of go with this. But that's another way to kind of zhuzh it up a little bit. Sharon, you said you're having connection issues. Okay. Sharon, don't worry about it, because when you get your recording link tomorrow, I think you should be fine. So if you missed out on anything, you can either send me a question or you'll pick it up in the recording for anything that might have gapped out on you. Patty says, for the beading, am I using the hot application for them? No. You could, if you wanted to do the crystals and things like that. I suppose you could glue the beads, but I don't like to do that, only because when I travel with samples, I find that just going in and out of the suitcase and from being handled when people are photographing it or pinning it up on a wall or anything else, I find that it tends to knock them off more easily. I'll stitch them on. And again, I like to do the handwork, so that doesn't bother me at all. Any other questions about that? I will post pictures, and I would love it. Could you use the beading foot for small beads? These I would do like they wouldn't be beads on a string. You could definitely do that. That would be kind of cool, actually. If you wanted to add beads, say, on the edge of that trim, or if you eliminated the trim and wanted to do beading in the seams down it, that would be a very cool idea. I'm glad you asked that. Um, and I did do a Serger Savvy, I think in March. I think it's the March Serger Savvy on using a flat lock stitch to attach beads in the middle of fabric, but also I showed it going along the edge with a rolled hem too. And that's really fun. In fact, at Artistic Artifacts, oh, thanks, Anita. At Artistic Artifacts, we did a specialty feet and attachments class, and people went crazy with the beading foot because they had the little pearls, and we used the rolled hem to go on that. And that's a really easy technique to do. I'm glad you asked that because I hadn't thought about doing beading in the seam, but wouldn't that be really cool looking? That might be kind of nice too, if you were doing either, if you wanted to use something like, and they would have to be the beads on a string, not individual beads. But if you're doing kind of a dressy pillow and you wanted something like that, oh, Gaia says we went crazy with everything that I taught. But the beading foot was amazing, yes. And the gathering and ruffling or piping. Okay, see, this is why I love these classes. People are chiming in with different ideas. So you could do beading in the between the panels. You could do some gathering or puffing strips if you wanted to do that. You could also do piping too. So all of those things are variations that are to be considered for future projects. And again, that's why I like having the input from people. But I will post pictures as soon as I've got this all finished up. And hopefully it won't be too long. I'll probably be sitting playing with the beads for a while. That might be a good activity on a plane ride if I have like sticky tape that I can put them on so they're not rolling all over the floor of the airplane. But I'll post pictures of that. Maybe I'll do some works in progress too on that. That might be kind of fun too. But on the buttons, I have a bunch of different sizes. I picked out some that were bigger, but because this panel is narrow, I think I'm going to put those back and save them for something else. And maybe if I do use any buttons, I'll use the smaller ones just to keep the proportions nice. But of course, this I'm pointing to stuff, forgetting that you can't see it. Hang on a second. Yeah, this panel is narrow, so I might want to just do smaller things on it. But these medallions kind of look like they could fit like a bigger button if you wanted to put buttons on that, and echo the size of that motif, which would be kind of fun. But again, there are a lot of different possibilities. I've even thought of doing some beading along the top of this decorative stitching, which I think would be really, really pretty. But I always like to wait to do that embellishing until the panels are put together, because I don't want beads or buttons to get in the way of my stitching lines and cause any weird irregularities. But inserting lace too. Yep. See, all of these things are really cool ideas. I like hearing from people, and I love seeing it. If people would post or send me pictures, you can email them, gail@gailpatrice.com. That's really fun to do. I didn't mention it earlier, but I do have my Bayside Blooms and Paint Box threads. Those are the 12 weight collections. There are 10 different colors in each one. Is there a good place to buy Invisifil? If you will not find those in any of the big box stores. I can guarantee you, like Hobby Lobby, Michael's, none of those. You're not going to find it there. You can go on to wonderfil.co They're a Canadian company, and I think they have a menu of dealers that sell their products. I know there are more and more dealers who do sell them, but I think as a consumer, I believe you can order from them directly too. Um, Patty said Poppy Quilt and Sew has it. I think that's in, oh yeah, Artistic Artifacts. You can order it from them. They're in, is it Arlington or Alexandria, Virginia? Gaia. I always forget. Alexandria. Okay. Yeah. Artisticartifacts.com. They have a huge selection of wonderful threads. And I'm sure they must have the Invisifil. The next lightest one, I believe. Oh, Pam, thank you very much. She said you can order directly from shopwonderfil.com. So that's in your chat. You can pick that up as a link and order that. The next one that would be the next lightest one would be Deco Bob. That is their 80 weight bobbin thread. And Red Rocks Threads has all kinds of threads, including Wonderfil. Yep. So that's an online source as well. I always like to support my local dealers, though, first, only because, and I sound like a broken record because I say it in so many classes, if we don't support our local dealers, guess what? They're not going to be able to stay in business. And then who's going to fix our machines? Who's going to offer classes and sell machines and all of that stuff? So, I do always say support your local dealers first, but if they don't carry it, then you can go. And Gaia says, and Artistic Artifacts is faster in their delivery. Yeah. Yeah, that's the only downside from Wonderfil is that because it's Canadian and comes across the border, it does take a little more time, I believe. But Artistic Artifacts is right in Virginia, and I think they ship everywhere because they have a huge selection of fabrics. They have a huge selection of threads. That store is amazing. It's really incredible. But again, University of Sewing has it on sale for 25% off right now. I think University, is that Indiana, I believe? I think she's in Indiana.
Yes, she's in Indiana, Margaret. Yes, Bloomington.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So those are all good places to buy it from. But I really do encourage you to please, even if it costs a couple of dollars more, support the local dealers. We need them. We need them to stay in business. We need them to tune up our machines and all that other happy stuff. So, in Bloomington, Indiana. Yes, that's right. I couldn't remember what town it was, but it's Bloomington, Indiana. That's University of Sewing. And the woman who owns that is Margaret. I don't know whether she says Fett or Fetty. Fette, I believe, is her last name. Very nice woman. Fetty. Okay, thank you. See all the stuff I learned in the class. Okay, I think we're good. We're ending a little bit early, but thanks, Sharon. If anyone has any questions, feel free to contact me. My favorite tip in the class is using that 100-weight thread to attach the belt loop folder strips or your other one. Thanks, Sandy. But I'll try to post some pictures that are works in progress too, since I've shown you this. And this fabric, again, was a Moda fabric, and it came in a bunch of different colorways. I got it at Colchester Mills, which is down Route 2 for me in Connecticut. I just thought it was really summery, very pretty, very fresh looking. And I actually have a niece who has an 8-week-old baby, and I think this would look really nice in her nursery. So I may give it to her. Don't tell her. Anyway, if you think of questions after we sign off, you can always shoot me an email on that. I will get that link out to you tomorrow. And if anyone was in my Decode the Stitch class, you heard about my boo-boo of how I deleted that. That is in the process of being edited right now so that it will go back up so nobody has to feel like they lost the class when they were promised that they would have the link. But I'm doing it as a pre-recorded class this time. But that's in the works. Um, anyway, okay, so we can sign off a little bit early. You can get your weekend going, and I will post some other progress pictures as we go along, some of my beading and all that other fun stuff. But thank you all so much for spending part of your Saturday with me. I always say the only thing better than a Zoom class is an in-person class when I get to see all of you in person. But this lets us all connect from all over the United States and the world. Sometimes we have people from overseas as well, which I think we do in this class, but people who were going to watch the recording rather than the live class. But if there are no more questions, I think we can sign off and let you get the rest of your weekend started. So thank you again. I hope you all enjoy your sewing and serging. And if you have friends who haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel or you haven't, please do. You'll get a notification that I've posted either a new tip clip or when the Serger Savvy live on YouTube goes up, you'll get a notification on that. I never share or sell my email list or subscriber list. Never, ever, and I never will. So you won't get spammed. But tell your friends who are sewing friends too to please subscribe. But anyway, I hope you all have a great weekend. I want to see your pillows and happy sewing and serging. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.